My wife walked out the door when I had nothing left, leaving me with nothing but broken promises and shattered dreams. My name is Jason, 35 years old. A few years ago, I was just a regular guy trying to make something of myself. The corporate world had chewed me up, spat me out, and left me drowning in debt. My wife, Rachel, was there for all of it, or at least I thought she was. We were married for 6 years, living in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. I was working my tail off, taking on every freelance job I could find, and still barely scraping by. Rachel was a successful lawyer, always on top of her game, constantly climbing the ladder. I admired her for that. I always saw her as the strong one, the one who held things together. But things started to change. The more I struggled, the more distant she became. I'll never forget the night she came to me, a cold look in her eyes, and told me she couldn't do this anymore. "I need someone who can keep up with me, someone who doesn't drag me down," she said, her voice flat. "I can't be with someone who doesn't have their life together." Those words stung like a slap to the face. I had no idea she felt that way. But it wasn't just the words that hurt. It was the way she said them, like she'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. I begged her to stay, promised I'd turn things around, but she was already done. The decision had been made. She walked out, leaving me alone in the apartment we had once shared, the silence echoing louder than any argument ever could. My heart broke that night, but more than the pain of losing her, I felt humiliated. She had left me because I wasn't successful enough, because I didn't have the wealth and status she craved. She wanted more than I could give her, and in her eyes, I wasn't enough. Months passed, and I struggled to pull myself back up. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what had gone wrong. I still loved her, despite everything. But with every passing day, the bitterness grew. The pain of losing her faded, but the anger didn't. It became a driving force, a motivation to prove to myself that I was capable of something greater than the man she had walked away from. I threw myself into work, taking on every opportunity one could. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. I started my own business, something I'd always dreamed of but never had the resources to pursue. At first, it was just me, working from a tiny office with barely enough money to cover rent. But I refused to give up. The first big break came when I landed a lucrative contract with a major corporation. It was a game changer. I hired a team, expanded the business, and within a few years, I was on top of my game. I won't lie, the success felt sweet. But what really fueled me was the thought of Rachel, the woman who had walked out on me when I had nothing, now seeing me rise from the ashes. The tables had turned, and I knew exactly how I was going to make her regret her decision. I heard through mutual friends that Rachel had gone through a tough time after our divorce. Her career hit a snag, and she had to make some tough choices. The woman who had once been at the top of her game now found herself struggling to find work. She had lost her shine, the one thing that had made her so attractive to others. I'm not proud of the fact that I took pleasure in hearing about her downfall, but I couldn't help it. It felt like fate had dealt her the same hand she had dealt me. Then, one day, I got an email. It was from Rachel. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke or spam, but when I opened it, I saw her name and the subject line, "Desperate for a job." I couldn't believe what I was reading. She was asking for a job at my company. Not just any job, but a position that would put her under my command, working for me, the same man she had discarded years ago. The email was professional, but I could sense the desperation in her words. She didn't come out and say it, but I knew she was struggling. The woman who once looked down on me, the woman who had walked away from me when I had nothing, was now begging for a chance to work for me. The irony of it all hit me hard. I had everything now, the success, the wealth, the status, and she was on the other side of the table, hoping for a chance to prove herself. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to make her sweat. I wanted her to know that the power had shifted. For years, I had been the one begging, but now, she was the one who needed something from me. The next day, I called her. The sound of her voice on the other end of the line sent a chill down my spine. She sounded nervous, almost unsure of herself. I didn't know who else to turn to. she said, her words cautious. "I've been struggling to find something, and I know you're doing well. I just need a chance. Please." I paused for a moment, letting the silence hang between us. The woman who had once walked away from me, the woman who had thought she was too good for me, was now asking for my help. I told her I'd think about it, and hung up. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice, the way she clung to the hope that I might offer her something, anything. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to make it easy for her. The days that followed Rachel's desperate email were a blur. I could barely focus on anything else as her words echoed in my mind. It wasn't just that she needed a job, it was that she had nowhere else to turn. I could sense the desperation in her tone. She was a woman used to being in control, used to having everything fall into place. But now, she was knocking on my door, asking me for something she had once rejected so easily. The tables had turned, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to let her back into my life. I spent the next few days mulling over what to do. Part of me wanted to make her suffer, to watch her squirm in the same way I had when she left me. After all, this was the woman who had discarded me, who had made me feel worthless. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the good times we had, wondered if maybe I could show her some mercy. Perhaps it was time to move on, to forgive and forget, and offer her the job she needed. But deep down, I knew I wasn't that person anymore. I had worked hard for everything I had achieved, and Rachel had never understood that. She had always taken me for granted, assuming I would always be there to pick up the pieces. She had walked away from me when I needed her the most, and now she was coming back to me when her own life had crumbled. There was no way I was going to make this easy for her. The next time I spoke to her, I made sure to let her sweat a little. I had her waiting for days. I wanted her to feel the anxiety I had felt when she left me, when I was wondering how I was going to survive without her. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be the one who needed something, to be the one who was at the mercy of someone else's decision. When I finally called her back, she sounded almost relieved. "Thank you for getting back to me," she said, her voice quiet but hopeful. "I know this is a big favor, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove myself." I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it didn't matter. I had already made up my mind. "I'll offer you a position," I told her, "but it won't be easy. You'll start at the bottom. I want you to remember exactly how far you've fallen. You'll report to me directly, and I expect you to work harder than you've ever worked before. No exceptions." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear her processing my words, the weight of them settling in. But then, to my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "I'm ready to start." I could tell she was desperate. The woman who had once looked down on me, the woman who had humiliated me, was now begging for a chance. But this wasn't going to be easy for her. I wanted her to feel the same powerlessness that I had felt when she walked away from me. I wanted her to know what it was like to be in my shoes, to be the one who was at the mercy of someone else's decisions. The first few days were uncomfortable, to say the least. Rachel, now working for me, was forced to sit through meetings with employees who had once been beneath her. I could see the discomfort in her eyes, the way she tried to maintain her composure, but it was clear that she was struggling. She was no longer the top dog. She was just another employee, working her way up from the bottom. I made sure to assign her the toughest tasks, the ones no one else wanted. I wanted to remind her of the reality of the situation. I wanted her to feel the weight of her past mistakes, to understand that I wasn't going to let her off the hook just because she needed a job. She had abandoned me, and now she was going to pay for it. But what I didn't expect was how much I enjoyed watching her struggle. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about watching her face the consequences of her actions. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as I watched her work late into the night, her eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. She had once been the one in control, the one who called the shots. Now, she was the one who was forced to answer to me. Over time, Rachel began to show signs of cracking. She wasn't used to this kind of work. She wasn't used to being treated like everyone else, to being held accountable for her mistakes. I could see the toll it was taking on her, the stress and frustration building up with every passing day. It was almost like watching a wall crumble, piece by piece, that I made sure to remind her of who was in charge. Whenever she made a mistake, I was there to point it out, to make sure she knew that she wasn't going to get away with anything. I could see the anger building in her, the frustration at being in a position where she was no longer the one in control. But she didn't have a choice. She had to play by my rules now. One afternoon, as we were wrapping up a meeting, Rachel came to my office. I could tell something was bothering her. Her face was flushed, and her hands were shaking as she stood in front of my desk. "I'm doing everything I can," she said, her voice trembling. "But it's not enough. I'm trying, but I can't keep up." I looked at her for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. She was begging me, just like she had begged for the job in the first place. But this time, I wasn't going to show any mercy. "You wanted this job," I reminded her, my voice cold. "You begged for it. Now you're going to have to work for it. If you can't keep up, that's on you." The look in her eyes was a mix of frustration and desperation. I could see the tears welling up, but I didn't care. This was the price she had to pay for leaving me when I had nothing. And I wasn't. As the weeks went by, Rachel's performance started to decline. I could see the cracks in her facade. The woman who had once been so confident, so sure of herself, was now walking around like a shadow of her former self. The long hours, the endless tasks, and the constant pressure were beginning to wear her down. But the worst part for her was knowing that she had no choice but to keep going. She had nowhere else to turn. I couldn't help but watch her from the corner of my eye, enjoying the slow unraveling of the woman who had once held so much power over me. Every time I called her into my office to review her work, I saw the way her shoulders slumped, the way her hands trembled when she handed over the reports. She was breaking, and I knew that every time she came to me for guidance, every time she asked for a little help, I could offer her nothing but more demands. At first, Rachel tried to maintain some semblance of dignity. She would walk into the office, put on her best smile, and pretend everything was fine. But it was becoming increasingly clear that she couldn't keep up the act. Her confidence was gone. The arrogance that had once defined her was now replaced by uncertainty and self-doubt. One evening, after a particularly grueling week of work, Rachel came into my office, her face pale and her eyes red from lack of sleep. "I don't know how much more I can take," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm doing everything I can, but it's never enough. I'm drowning in all of this, and I don't know how to get out." I looked at her for a long moment, weighing my options. Part of me wanted to offer her some relief, to tell her that it would all be over soon, that she could move on and find another way out of this mess. But that wasn't what I wanted. I wanted her to feel the weight of her decisions. I wanted her to experience the same hopelessness and despair that I had felt when she walked away from me. "You wanted to work here," I reminded her, my tone cold and unwavering. "You begged for this job, and now you're going to have to earn it. No one's going to hand you anything. Not anymore." Rachel's eyes darted to the ground, her shoulders shaking with the weight of her emotions. She was at her breaking point. I could see it in the way she held herself, the way she couldn't look me in the eye anymore. She had nothing left to fight with. All the armor she had once worn so proudly was now shattered. But what surprised me the most was that I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing. And in that moment, I realized just how far I had come. The man she had left behind was no longer the same. I had grown stronger, more ruthless. And now, I was in control. Rachel was no longer the one calling the shots. I was. The next day, I assigned her the most difficult task she had ever faced. It was a project that would require all of her skills, all of her experience, and all of her energy. I knew it would push her to the brink, but I didn't care. If she was going to make it here, she would have to prove herself. And I wasn't going to make it easy for her. As Rachel sat at her desk, working tirelessly on the project, I watched her from my office. I could see the frustration in her movements, the way her brow furrowed as she tried to make sense of the complicated reports. She was struggling. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of satisfaction. This was what she deserved. This was the price she had to pay for leaving me when I needed her. The days turned into weeks, and Rachel's performance continued to decline. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and completely burned out. She came to me more and more, asking for help, but I refused to give her anything. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. One day, she came into my office, her face pale and drawn. "I can't do it," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm done. I can't keep up with all of this. I've tried, but I'm failing." I looked at her, unfazed. "You wanted this job," I said again, my voice colder than ever. "You begged for it. You wanted to prove yourself, to show me that you could make it. But now, you're telling me that you can't handle it? That's not my problem. You made your choice." Rachel stood there for a long moment, tears welling up in her eyes. I could see the desperation in her face, the pleading look she gave me, but it didn't move me. I wasn't the same man who had begged for her to stay. I wasn't the same man who had once relied on her for validation. "You have two options," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You can either finish this project and prove that you can handle it, or you can leave. The choice is yours." I watched her stand there, torn between her pride and the reality of her situation. She knew she couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when everything she had worked for had crumbled beneath her. But the most satisfying part of all of this was that she didn't leave. She stayed. And she continued to struggle, just like I had. And every day that she struggled, every day that she fought to keep up, I felt a sense of power that I had never known before. I had made her beg. I had made her face the consequences of her actions. And I wasn't done with her yet. Another month dragged on, and it was almost sad how predictable Rachel had become. She arrived earlier than anyone else, left long after the office lights dimmed, her once vibrant presence reduced to a hunched, exhausted figure buried behind piles of reports and endless tasks. The woman who once left me at rock bottom was now drowning in a storm I controlled. And you know what? I enjoyed every second of it. But what surprised me most wasn't how much she crumbled, it was how long she lasted. Every time I thought she'd finally give up and disappear, she clung on by her fingertips, begging for one more chance, silently praying for a shred of mercy I had no intention of offering. I kept piling on the pressure. More projects. Harsher deadlines. Tasks so tedious and thankless no one else would touch them. But she did, because she had nowhere else to go. Then came the day I had been waiting for. The final breaking point. It was a Thursday evening, just past 9 p.m. The office was empty. The only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional rustle of papers. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. "Please, can I speak to you?" I'm at my desk. Curious, I walked over. She looked worse than I had ever seen her. Eyes sunken, hair a mess, her face streaked with silent tears. She didn't even pretend anymore. No fake smile. No forced confidence. Just raw, exhausted, shattered Rachel. "I can't do this," she whispered, not even looking up. I can't take another day of this. I've lost everything. My savings, my home, my friends. I thought coming here would fix things. I thought maybe you'd help me, but I realize now, you were never going to." I said nothing. Let her spill every ounce of regret she'd bottled up for years. She admitted everything. How she left because she thought I'd hold her back. How she married a man she didn't love because he had money. How it all collapsed when he lost everything, leaving her penniless, humiliated, and alone. How the friends she'd once laughed with now ignored her calls. How she envied me every day she walked into my office, realizing too late that the man she thought wasn't enough was now everything she could never have. And then she said the words I never thought I'd hear. "I'm sorry. For everything. I was selfish. I was cruel. And I deserve this. But please, I'll take anything you give me. Anything. Just don't fire me. This is all I have left." I let the silence stretch, watching the weight of her words settle around us. Then I spoke, my voice calm and steady. "You were right back then, Rachel. I wasn't enough. But not because I lacked money or status, because I lacked the strength to see your true worth. Or lack of it. And now, you're exactly where you belong." Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time, she didn't argue, didn't beg, just nodded. And that's when I made my final move. I slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a letter of transfer to a branch in a small, remote city far from here. A demotion so severe it was practically a punishment. She'd be doing menial admin work, completely stripped of her title, authority, and pride. "You leave tomorrow," I said. "And don't bother coming back." For a moment, I thought she might refuse. that maybe some spark of defiance would flare up. But instead, she picked up the folder with trembling hands, stood, and whispered, "Thank you." And then she was gone. As I watched her disappear down the corridor, something inside me felt lighter. Not just because I'd gotten revenge, not just because I'd made her pay for what she did, but because I realized I didn't need her forgiveness, or her approval, or even her presence. I had finally let go of the anger, the hurt, and the need for validation. Rachel's fall was complete, and my rise wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was enough, all along. And as I left the office that night, for the first time in years, I smiled. Not because of what I'd done to her, but because of what I'd finally done for me. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another mind-blowing revenge story just like this. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.